Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Star Wars Starship Versus. Still not sure on the name, still working on it, so if you have an idea, put it in the comments below. As I promised, today's video is featuring the top rated matchup posted in the comments by you guys from last video. And today that is the Bellator class Super Star Destroyer versus the Subjugator class Destroyer. Now, unlike last video, these aren't exactly the most well-known ships, so let's take a few seconds to look into their details. The Bellator is really interesting to me because it's part of the larger Manticore class ship line. This line started with the Procurator class star battle cruiser, and then the Malevolence class star dreadnought, which was actually one of the first dreadnoughts in use throughout the entire galaxy. The ship was considered pretty old by the time of the Clone Wars, but was brought back into service and upgraded for use by the Republic. They would later create the Malevolence II class star dreadnought, which was basically an upgraded version of the Malevolence I. This is where the ship line stayed until the time of the Galactic Empire, where it diverged into the Bellator class dreadnought and the Malevolence III class dreadnought. Both of these ships emphasize different parts of the Malevolence line. The Malevolence III with its large size and heavy firepower, and the Bellator with a focus on speed. As I said, the Bellator was used by the Empire. It was about 7 kilometers long and it was extremely fast. Those are the main things that you should know going into this matchup. It was also a legend ship and it was never really the main focus of any book, so a lot of what I'm going to talk about here is kind of speculation on my part. Next, let's talk about the Subjugator class heavy cruiser, and this ship appeared primarily in the Star Wars Clone Wars TV show. Since the Manticore is a legend ship, we're going to use Legends information for the Subjugator. The ship was nearly 5 kilometers long and was used primarily by the Confederacy of Independent System. Most notable about the ship was its ion cannon, which helped it operate as almost a quasi-super weapon, but we'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. So, as we did last time, we're going to be putting these ships together one-on-one with several key rules, and the first is that the ships are presumed to be piloted by equally competent captains. Second, these ships get no backup. It's whatever they can carry into battle and nothing else that will be considered. Finally, I'm going to be comparing these ships' weaponry, their defensive capability, their carrying capacity, and any intangibles to see which ship comes on top. Now, just because one wins 2 or even 3 categories doesn't necessarily mean that it wins the day, because I'm going to be looking at how they perform overall. Alright, so let's get started with weaponry, and we'll look first at the Bellator. Now, there are no canon sources which say exactly how many weapons this ship had. However, the creator of the ship, Ansel Howe, has described it as being extremely well armed, with about 100 main weapons and then literally thousands of backup ion cannons, turbo lasers, and point defense laser cannons, along with missile launchers. And while those numbers aren't official, they seem to be consistent with the official renderings of the ship. On the other hand, comparatively, the Subjugator was not well armed by conventional means, though it still had a pretty impressive 500 dual turbo laser. That being said, the main weapon of the Subjugator class was its ion cannon, which was shown to be able to disable multiple Republic ships in one shot. It wasn't perfect, however, and could only fire once before needing to be recharged. It also traveled much slower than a conventional weapon, though it did appear to increase in size over distance. And its slow speed meant that it could be avoided if anticipated, at least by smaller fighters. I'm going to call this category even, although the Bellator is much more well armed conventionally, at least by my estimates. The Malevolence has use of its super weapon. I'm now going to talk very briefly about defensive capabilities, and although the technical specifications for these two ships haven't really been clearly laid out, I'm going to nonetheless give it to the Bellator. As an Imperial capital ship, it would have had a very thick hull as well as redundant shielding. On the other hand, the Subjugator was based on much older technology, and though the body of the ship could take a good amount of damage and keep going, the ion cannon was shown to be a particularly weak spot. Next, let's look at fighter support. And this is another category where I have to make some kind of leaps of logic. We know for a fact that the Subjugator carries 140 standard Vulture-class droid fighters and 48 Hyena-class bombers. This is a pretty decent mix of fighters, though nothing impressive for a ship that size. On the other hand, it's not even clear that the Bellator carried any fighters. None of the official sources give it a carrying capacity, and when you look at the models of the ship, it doesn't appear that there are any large hangars. Given that the ship is based on speed, and we know that sometimes the Imperials removed hangars on ships like the Tector class when they wanted to remove weak points, I think it's a safe assumption to say that this ship was not meant to carry fighters. That being said, I could be wrong about it, so just to be fair, I'm going to call this section as equal. So I'm going to skip intangibles now and go straight into the analysis. I think the key to this battle is what happens when the Subjugator shoots its ion cannon. I mean, we know that Imperial ships have pretty strong shielding, but it's not clear whether they could tank a shot from the ion cannon. It's my guess that while a larger ship like the Malevolence III probably could, I don't think the Bellator would do very well if caught by the blast. So really the question is, can it avoid the shot? And this is really what makes the battle interesting, especially because the Bellator is built for speed, unlike other Imperial ships. Also interesting is that we have to presume that the ships don't know the capabilities of each other. And it all really comes down to this first shot, because if the Bellator can survive, it will definitely take down the Confederate capital ship. It's much larger, advanced, and well armed. I think if it comes down to it and the two ships come into contact with each other at a decent range and head to head, the Bellator will be able to make use of its speed and will avoid the blast. And I think even if it isn't able to do so fully, partial hit by the blast won't be enough to disable the entire ship. At that point, the Subjugator won't be able to fire again and will be at the mercy of the much more well-armed Imperial ship. And it doesn't really have enough fighters to make up the difference, even if the Bellator carries none. So well armed with point defense laser cannons that I really don't think even 200 fighters will be able to make any sort of difference. And I know the Subjugator is often classified as a very strong, very durable ship, but that's when compared to Republic starships. An Imperial Dreadnought is something completely different and much more powerful. I think it will melt through it with no problem. In conclusion, I give it to the Mandator 6.5 times out of 10. The main concern is whether the Subjugator can hit it with the ion shot on its first attempt. Given that the Mandator is designed for speed and that the ion shot is pretty slow, I think it will be able to avoid it more times than not. And although it might not know exactly what the blast is, I think any smart captain will know to avoid it. If the Mandator is given fighters, I doubt it'd be able to launch it in time anyway, but that just helps its case. Anyways guys, let me know what you thought of this matchup, and of course, post the one you want to see next time in the comments. Also, if you got this far, what would you name your Bellator class cruiser? Keeping in mind that it's especially designed for speed. Anyways guys, thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed, may the force be with you.